Good afternoon and welcome back. This is Dolynny TV. Glad to have you aboard here this afternoon as we get set up to discuss some things going around in oil country. Obviously some stuff that updated yesterday, kind of waiting for the update today, but hey, you know what? It's time to get a video up and it's time to get discussing some more Edmonton Oilers stuff that is regularly scheduled news this time of year. We've had just a week of fiasco with the offer sheets. Obviously, the Oilers decided to do what they did, and now we get down to the kind of situation of getting ready for training camp. One thing outstanding is the Draisaitl contract. I'll have that and more coming up in a brief moment, but I encourage you right now, okay? Take a second to consider hitting that subscribe button here on the channel. You might wonder why I ask you right up front. I want you to watch the video, take your time, consider it. At the end of the video, there will be a thing to hit subscribe right here on the video, or you can poke around the channel. Check out some other stuff. Plenty of content over on Dolynny TV, 3,000 plus videos. Want you to check it out. First thing we'll get to though today is the Draisaitl contract. Simply put, the Oilers, that is their main priority at this current moment, and we're waiting for news on that as we have been all summer. One would figure that Holloway and Broberg threw a little bit of a wrench into those plans because the Oilers had to evaluate the offer on the table and figure out if that could still work, if they matched one, whatever happened. They didn't match either. Offer, one would understand, is still valid. The one thing you got to understand though here is normally when big things happen in oil country, Bob Stauffer is in the chair. So he had a conversation with Brendan Escott. You can go find that conversation played out over on the Oilers Fanatic, and I strongly suggest you go over there because today's video is built around a few things Patrick said in his update over on his channel, just simply looking at it from a little bit more of maybe an expanded lens or a bit crazier lens, as you have come to find out is the nature here on the channel. So Bob Stauffer's off for the next bit. That's what you need to know. And hinted with Brendan Escott yesterday in a hit to begin the show that there may be news soon on the Draisaitl extensions. So again, like I said, you can find the full conversation over on the Oilers Fanatic, but I'm just basically giving you the Coles notes because I want to talk about basically right there. Actually, that's a slide too soon. My goodness, I'm all kinds of discombobulated. But the thing is, right, we've been expecting news on Draisaitl here, and it would assume now that the whole offer sheet thing is done, we'll be getting it sooner than later, and we will be seeing that number that has been hinted to be lower here for the Oilers. So we'll see what happens there. But again, that one I'm not too worried about. We'll kind of get news as it floods out. And again, I figure Bob Stauffer, based on that in and of itself, will be the number one source for all this. So also mentioned on Bob Stauffer's hit yesterday was hints towards a D-man for a PTO, and kind of hinting also that a former Chris Knobloch player would be the likely target for the Edmonton Oilers. There are two that make sense out there that are currently kind of sitting around maybe waiting for a PTO in Travis Dermott and Jared Tenorti. At least those are the two that are frequently being suggested. For me personally, I don't care either way. I really don't care anyway because we got a ton of D that can suit up. But the problem is you would need to maybe keep some kids around camp longer than you should if you've got your split squad games. Obviously, I think we got one with Calgary. So that was something Patrick mentioned that piqued my interest is, okay, now that makes sense why you would need a PTO is just to kind of fill out the roster, maybe the first 4 games of camp, and then away you go. So just to kind of recap that, right, PTO direction, who are we thinking? Well, we might be thinking, I don't know how that ended up getting dragged down here. Sorry, we'll get to that in a moment. The PTO potential, though, one name mentioned was Tenorti, who was in Hartford a couple years back with Chris Knobloch. Obviously, he's been, as you see in the picture, with the Chicago Blackhawks, and he's a serviceable camp competition defenseman. Obviously, if you're thinking about the Oilers' defense being in terrible shape right now, and you're like, man, you think Jared Tenorti's going to make it better? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying similar to what Patrick was going on about in his update today, is it is just about camp competition, and as you saw that slide pop up that was out of order, we'll get to that in a moment, but there's a reason why a serviceable camp competition defenseman might be useful for the Oilers here, whether it be Jared Tenorti or whether it be a guy like Travis Dermott, who has the Erie connection, right? The Oilers had how many Erie connection players over the past little bit here, but this one in particular just on a PTO, just a guy that comes in and maybe plays for the Oilers for 3 or 4 games, kind of similar to what a Brandon Sutter's done, what a Jake Virtanen did the year before, Justin Bailey, guys like that. There's been a ton of different guys on PTOs over the past few years. And what we kind of talked about as well, again, just serviceable camp competition there for Travis Dermott. But what we've talked about previously, if you're new to the channel, kind of missed the past few weeks of content here on Dolynny TV, what we talked about was a new PTO direction for the Edmonton Oilers, and something that we haven't really seen from the Oilers are guys who have direct connections to players, coaching staff, management on the roster. And obviously you see here for the Oilers, if they're targeting guys that have played for Chris Knoblauch before, that is obviously kind of a systems thing, that is a player familiarity thing, that is a direct difference of direction for the Oilers from previous management with Ken Holland. So looking forward to seeing how that might all play out here. As we go though, I want to also touch on the new DPairs. I know Patrick had this up in his video, but this is just the base. This is what we think the most likely scenario is. I know Patrick mentioned Emerson up next to Nurse. Of course, everything looks like it's pretty much the same from the playoffs. Just plug and play your right D, and you've got Josh Brown, who everybody called when he signed with the Oilers the worst defenseman in the NHL this past year. You've got him as your 7th defenseman. I would argue, and the reason you're watching still, is not so fast. I think I had a good conversation with Patrick yesterday, and the Oilers have done some things over the past few years to develop defensemen at the NHL level a little bit more. And like I said, this video is squarely built off of Patrick's video from earlier today. And the reason that is obviously when you're in the Oilers game and him and I are as connected to talking to each other as often, well, you start discussing random ideas. And I'm a guy not afraid to float random ideas. So as we go here, I think there would be some merit, and I think both Patrick and I were in agreement of that. We have a history of having Ekholm build up younger right-hand shot defensemen. We know that was kind of the idea maybe with Broberg this year. Well, that's what happened with Bouchard here the past few years. But we have also seen in previous years the Nurse-Bouchard pairing be a thing. Not that it's an effective thing, but again, if the Oilers defense isn't going to be top tier Game 7 Stanley Cup final defense for the first 30 games, it's not going to hurt to maybe try some different defense pairs. And the really 2 big changes you can make is knocking Ekholm down with Emerson. Nurse, if he's ready to really step into that 9.25 contract this year, you have him up there on the top pair with Bouchard. You kind of have him anchoring the pair, and then you have Bouchard moving the puck around, and maybe Nurse, like Ekholm, gaining some secondary assists. And well, there you have it. Now all of a sudden Nurse once again is a 40-plus point defenseman, and away you go. This is just one of those things when you talk about how the Oilers have been developing things on the right side over a little bit. I could see them wanting to put somebody responsible like Ekholm next to Emerson just to maybe calm down the nerves, and then you switch to what we all assume would be the case now. Maybe 20 games in, you go to Emerson and Nurse. Once Emerson's gotten into the system with the Oilers, you don't have to have Ekholm to hold his hand anymore. And I think that would also be kind of exactly when the Oilers start hitting their full flight. I would assume the Oilers come out of the gate either absolutely crazy to start, right? I think you don't see the start you did this year. In fact, you see the exact opposite, maybe 12-2-1 out of the gate. And all of a sudden the Oilers are flying, and then they start, okay, now what do we have to do to just really hold steady the rest of the way, right? If you can get a 5-point lead by game 15 of the regular season on first place in the Pacific Division, you can probably maintain that the rest of the year, knowing that the Oilers get better at the end of the year, knowing that there still might be a top 4D on the right side upgrade coming in for the Oilers. Whatever the case might be, the Oilers are only going to get better as the season goes on, and if the defense isn't quite at peak shape but they're still winning games, that'll allow you time to kind of get your feet under you as this season goes along. So let me see if we've got this one here. Yes, we've already covered that. So let's go here and discuss the other options we have. Again, like I said, I'm not a guy afraid to float maybe the crazier ideas up front. And you know what? Max Warner, he's a name that popped up sometime during the offer sheet week, kind of as an option. Hey, he could possibly be a guy that floats around the Oilers pairings at least at some point this season. And I know he impressed at camp over the past 2 years. I think it's been 2 years since we drafted him. So I would assume that he might get to factor into some games sooner than later this year. And another young guy, when you're talking about young drafted guys that could make an impact, that have higher trajectory than maybe some of the other guys on the farm, is what of Bo Akey, right? I think maybe you see him get a little bit of a tester at the NHL level, especially if the Oilers aren't fully set on how they want to run the DPairs, and you might be able to do some things with the cap that you didn't think of because maybe you have Evander Kane going to LTIR sooner than later, or whatever the case might be. There's a lot of things up in the air still for the Oilers. So maybe Bo Akey gets a little cup of coffee at the NHL level and goes back down to the OHL following 1 or 2 games. Who knows? Again, right? You could send down both Stetcher and Brown to make it work. So there's potential here for the Edmonton Oilers. Still all options on the table, and you'll love to hear that from Stan Bowman yesterday. So we go to the other names that I think make more sense than Warner or Akey, at least to begin the season. You got Phil Kemp, Ben Gleason, Cam Dineen, who we acquired for that trade with Arizona 2 years back when we acquired Nick Bjugstad, and then Noel Hoffenmeyer as well, right? There's a couple options there. I think, Kemp and Gleason are guys that spent time with the Oilers last year getting an NHL paycheck. I think Cam Dineen, you have to make a choice on here sooner or later, or start thinking about trading him for some sort of asset before he walks away due to lack of playing time. And Noel Hoffenmeyer, a guy who dealt with injury last year, that very well could be a serviceable piece of your defense at times of injury if you want to give a guy a chance to showcase his skills at the NHL level. So there's plenty of names. This is the crazy part. I mean, go over these slides one more time. You got 4 guys on this one. You got 2 guys on the other one, right? You got 2 guys here, and then you've got 7 main guys that we're all looking at as our 7 defensemen to start the year anyway. But you're talking about a group of a grand total of what? 6, 7, 13. So you're talking, you add in a PTO, you've got 14. And now all of a sudden you've got a ton of guys that you can plug and play throughout the training camp. And there's other guys in here that will get training camp time, don't you worry. But it just seems insane to me that the Oilers actually have a bunch of depth in that 7, 8, 9 role in the organization when it comes to the defense. And that's just something that, again, when I look at these options, I like these a lot more than some of the other options we've had over the past few years. So the Oilers have definitely done a good job building up the bottom part, or the bottom top part of the defense core. And it'll be really interesting to see who sits 7, 8, 9 in the organization to start the year in Bakersfield and in the NHL levels. So camp competition is going to be key, and I think that's really the main theme of this video today is, yeah, the Draisaitl news is what it is, but that's just an update saying expected soon. I think the big key here is really the next 10 days as we get towards captain skates after the September long weekend. It's going to be awesome to see what exactly shakes out for the Oilers defense, because we got some good guys to push, and that should demand more out of our defense than we got last year to begin the year, at least. So even though our defense might be worse than it was last year, I think at some point it is going to be much better as the season goes on. I'm going to leave you right now. I think I'm done talking. I'm tired of talking. It's been 12 minutes. I think we're up on done. 13, 14 actually now. So thank you for being aboard. Like I said at the start, just take the video, consider hitting that subscribe button. You're going to see this pop up at the end of the video as well, my little channel icon that you can click on. But please, down below in the video, consider hitting that subscribe button. Stick around. It's going to be a fun season, and we're truly on our way now that offer sheet week is up on done. I'm up on out of here, and we'll catch you in the next one.